Our story begins on a stormy night. Lightning struck from very dark clouds. Despite this, the imperial village was silent at night. Lightning flashed, lighting up the sky. The sound of the thunder was intense. Bolts of lightning fell among the trees. Submerged in a lake, there was a little boy. His eyes were closed, as if he were deeply asleep beneath the water. Suddenly, his eyes opened. He finally became aware of where he was. Then, his hand reached the edge of the lake. At last, he managed to get out of the water, breathing deeply. The boy realized that he was back. But how could that have happened? Looking at his hands, he wondered, could the heavens have felt that they owed me something, Ning Huimin? He is our protagonist, and we will call him Ning. The boy was confused, wondering if life had granted him a second chance. Suddenly, Ning hears a baby crying. However, after looking around, he realized that there was no baby near him. Nearby, a house, a child was crying. A young woman hands a baby to an older lady, praising the child's strong lungs, which from an early age already showed her good health. She was certainly a child destined for greatness. The little baby begins to cry even more. She thinks that if she knew she would meet her fate that night, she would cry even harder. She introduces herself as Ju Yuji, or to us, Zuzu. Just 5 minutes earlier, she had been transported into that story. The good news was that she was the daughter of Prince Anping. The bad news was that soon she would depart because her mother, Liu Ruyan, was the villain of that story. She had just arrived in a drama called 3 Acts of Torment, a melodrama in which the prince falls in love with a consort. The male protagonist was Zhu Qiaosheng, the prince of Anping, her father. Her mother could have been the princess consort, but she was only an antagonist. But the couple would go through something far worse. Liu Ruyan and the female protagonist gave birth on the same night, and Qiaosheng, in a desperate act to legitimize the daughter he had with his true love, made the drastic decision to switch the babies. An anxious old woman held one of the babies, trying to muffle the crying. The truth was that she had already placed one of the babies in a basket and was about to carry one of them away. And what about Zuzu? She would suffer during the switch, a piece in the prince's perverse game, and just now she had managed to return. Moments before this happened. What a catastrophic beginning. Very clever. The baby pretends to be dead. The old woman knew that the prince despised both children and that all he wanted was to get rid of them. Zuzu had a foolproof plan. She tried to pull her half-sister's hair. How could she sleep in a situation like that? Not a single scream? The baby was almost waking up. As she stepped away, the old woman hears a very loud cry coming from the basket. Zuzu throws a little punch at her half-sister. She hopes that it works because now it was her turn. Then, while her sister cries, she screams as well. The princess, who had just given birth, hears a baby crying. She asked one of the women if something was happening to her daughter. The woman replied that it was a trick of the mind because babies could not talk. Suddenly, the women hear the cries of 2 babies. Realizing that something was very wrong, the green-eyed woman calls the guards and asks them to bring her daughter. The old woman hears the guards being ordered to arrest her. A mysterious figure approaches from behind her. A young man approaches the old woman and asks what she was doing with his sister. That wicked old woman was caught red-handed. Suddenly, the young man noticed something. How could it be possible for there to be 2 babies there? The woman picks up the basket to show what she was seeing. She hands the basket to the princess consort, while another woman drags the old woman across the room. While the mother looks anxiously at the babies, her husband arrived. The prince of Anping, Zhu Qiaosheng, is the father of Zhu Yuxi. He asked what was happening. One of the women turns to explain to him that the nanny had been bribed and was seen trying to switch the children. The prince's plan was discovered. What will he do now? Everyone there realizes that the commotion had been so great that it was difficult to tell the 2 babies apart. He falls silent, thinking about what he could do next. The prince asks his wife what she would like to do. The princess consort, with her violet hair and red eyes, looked very distressed. She could not decide which of the children was her daughter. Suddenly, one of the babies grabbed her hand. However, it was the wrong daughter. What a situation. The prince, seeing his plan almost working, tells Ruyan that the baby who grabbed her finger must be her daughter. However, Zuzu knew that this was not quite true. With her tiny hand, she hits her half-sister, making her release her mother's finger, and thus she managed to hold it. Zuzu was annoyed by the other's audacity, trying to steal her mother. Ruyan wondered if she had managed to hear a baby's voice. Our protagonist was desperate for her mother to recognize her and see that the other one was an imposter. The prince observed both of them, while the princess wondered whether there might be some psychic connection between mother and daughter. He turns to the old woman and commands her to reveal which of the 2 children is his legitimate daughter. The old woman points to the gray-haired child, the daughter of his lover. Zuzu becomes furious. for she saw everything as if from a goddess's perspective, and she knew that child was the result of one of her father's flings. The princess must have heard some of Zuzu's thoughts, because she looked at the prince in surprise, wondering how her husband, always so faithful, could have a lover. The prince picks up his lover's daughter and, calling her dear little daughter, announces that he would deal with that criminal immediately. However, before the guards could arrest the old woman, he was interrupted. The princess begs him to investigate what happened, for rash actions were not wise. She realized that his haste to get rid of the other child was very suspicious. The young man dressed in yellow says that the princess was right. Perhaps that old woman was plotting something. They should get the truth from her at any cost. The boy was called Jijian, or to us, Jian. He is the third son of Prince Kaosheng and Liu Ruyan. The old woman reveals to them that she was blinded by greed and wanted her granddaughter to live in comfort, so she dared to switch the babies and begged for mercy. Zuzu knew that if they believed that nonsense from the old woman, it would be her imminent end. Perhaps she should already jump into the line for the next reincarnation. She opened her arms, striking an angelic pose, ready to say goodbye to her mother. The princess tells her husband that the old woman was very cunning. If she managed to deceive them and later claim the baby as her granddaughter, she would win. Zuzu was surprised to hear the prince suggest that they perform a test. The little baby was very agitated, trying in vain to communicate with her mother. Ruyan wondered if she needed to touch her daughter for them to communicate. Zuzu was already completely out of patience. Our protagonist was indeed very determined. The princess caressed the baby in the basket without imagining what she was thinking. The prince decides to perform a test to see which of the two was his daughter. Now the princess was distressed, as she seemed to sense the baby telling her how that world was nothing but a gigantic imitation of a palace of schemes. She decides that they would proceed according to her husband's suggestion. The princess gives a meaningful look to one of the girls there. The young woman silently nods. They approach the old woman to perform the test, and that same young woman from before trips the old woman. What a low blow. The water is spilled and the old woman falls to the ground with a dull thud. She tells the princess that she had been pushed by the girl. The princess looks at her with disdain, asking if the old woman was calling Luby, her servant, a liar. For what reason would she push her? The noblewoman asks Luby to fetch more water so that they can try to perform the test again. Suddenly, a man wearing delicate white clothes arrives in the chambers. He is Jimo, the eldest son of Prince Chaosheng and Ruyan. Everyone seemed happy that he had returned. He elegantly greets his parents and younger brother. Then, he reveals to everyone that he had heard the entire conversation and says that the test would not be effective. If his mother remembered well, before conceiving her daughter, she had fallen into an icy lake and developed a syndrome related to the cold. He reminded her that the doctor had warned that this could be passed on to a child. Oh no, could that be why Zuzu had been feeling unwell earlier? A catastrophic restart was not enough. Apparently, she would live the archetype of a fragile and sickly girl. Did the universe want her to depart for good? The prince tries to explain that calling a doctor would take too much time. His son explains that fortunately, he had already brought a doctor to examine his sister. The doctor approaches, apologizing for the intrusion. He points out that the baby had a high fever. The prince watches his wife cradle the child. Zuzu grabs one of her mother's long locks of hair. It was unquestionable how much they truly resembled each other, however. Rian cries with emotion, knowing that her daughter would recover. Changing his strategy, the prince declares that the old woman should be punished and the imposter child should be discarded. The princess interrupts him, saying that there would be no drastic punishments, and that attitude surprises her eldest son. She commands the guards that the child and the old woman be confined, and that no one would enter there without her orders. With a threatening look, she warns that if anything happened to her daughter, she would personally punish the old woman. The crown prince wonders what was happening with his father and his mother. Far from there, a boy slept while an icy breeze filled his room. He woke up with a start. One of the servants called him, asking if the seventh prince was well. In his dream, he had felt feverish and suffocated, but when he woke up, he was safe and sound. Different from the baby's cry he had heard last time, this had been a faint whisper, as if someone were calling for their mother. He wondered who it could be. Rian held her baby, wishing for her to sleep. Luby approaches, advising that the princess let her maids take care of the baby, since she had stayed awake all night. The truth is that the princess felt guilty for making her daughter go through so much suffering, and she did not want to rest until she saw her recovering with her own eyes. Zuzu opened her eyes, and with great surprise she looked at her mother with her large golden eyes. Rian wondered, why did it seem so much like the baby was staring at her with such intensity? Upon seeing the little princess awake, Luby ran off to call the doctor. The mother gently touched the baby's face. Zuzu thought she was so beautiful that her mother's beauty could hypnotize her for a lifetime. As expected of the legendary Princess Rian, she was a villain, but she was never ugly. It was no wonder that she dominated half of that universe. Zuzu was very happy to be well with her mother. She was the fifth youngest daughter and had several older brothers who would protect her. A thought crossed Ruyan's mind. She remembered that since their marriage, besides Lady Jiang, a concubine he had taken before her, the prince had never brought any other woman home. He was seen as a devoted husband, but she had never known of his true love since Zuzu's birth. The baby touches her mother's face. The two of them exchange glances for a few moments. Ruyan says that Zuzu is her little princess. Our protagonist thought about how much her mother was a treasure in her life. The princess kisses the baby's precious cheek. She was in heaven. Suddenly, they are interrupted by Jimo. He approached his sister to see if she was all right. The crown prince rejoiced at seeing his little sister well. However, he turns to his mother and explains that there was something he still did not understand. Jimo begins to say that she imprisoned the old woman, forbade all visits, even from their father, and last night he saw her men taking the basin for the blood test. Was there any suspicion that the water had been tampered with? The princess fell silent. She knew that her son had always been very intelligent and must have noticed some subtlety. Avoiding the question, she asked what he thought of his father. The young prince asks if she wants him to tell the truth. He reminded her of when there had been rumors that the second son of his father, born from his union with Lady Jiang, would be the heir to the throne, but the woman vehemently denied it to him. It was something very strange because Jiang was very shy and would not spread such things. Previously, the prince had asked the emperor that only the legitimate children of his marriage would inherit royal privileges. Now that she had given birth to a third child, he wanted to name him heir. Some men commented on how much the prince valued his wife. The son continues to say that because of that, the reputation of the Prince of Anping as a good father and husband spread, and with the emperor's support, he obtained more privileges in the empire. Because of this, Jimo doubted greatly the facade his father displayed. She knew that her son had warned her many times about this, but she had spent a long time blinded by love. Before she began to cry, Zuzu touched her face. Mother and daughter once again exchanged glances. What a good feeling. Jimo noticed how good his sister was at comforting their mother. Despite being quite shy, he began to touch one of her cheeks. She did not want him to touch her, for ancient legends condemned that people with narrow eyes were monsters. Zuzu knew that Jimo was the smartest among the siblings. Suddenly, he became a little nervous. What was the reason for that? A funerary ritual was underway. In front of a memorial, the prince wept. However, the truth was that in order to marry his true love, he had orchestrated a way to get rid of his current wife, Zuzu's mother. When his older brother began to investigate what had happened, his father sent him on a risky diplomatic mission. On the return from this mission, the imperial carriage suffered an attempted ambush. Shortly afterward, the prince would become the most feared emperor for the next 1,000 years, a title of absolute power. To rise even higher, he spared no effort until one day he met his destiny. Zuzu held Jimo's finger. In her mind, she wished that her brother would be a decent man. Ruyan seemed to have heard that in her thoughts. Apparently, the young prince managed to read his sister's thoughts and wondered whether the little one was capable of foreseeing the future. It was no wonder that their mother's behavior had changed so drastically. Possibly that change was linked to his little sister's secret ability. He wondered if the others could also sense that. Suddenly, their connection was interrupted by their father's arrival. Jimo noticed that even the baby's expression changed. Chao Sheng entered the room after learning that the baby was awake and well. He tells the little one that he spent the entire night worried about her, and that the mere thought of her suffering left him sleepless. The older prince asked to hold his daughter, even amid the mother's protests. And then he took Zuzu. He did not understand why she was so tense. Despite being small, the child did not want even the slightest physical contact with him. However, the prince seemed grateful that her fever had stopped. Jimo and Ruyan realized that Chao Sheng had not yet noticed his daughter's abilities. Zuzu shot a threatening look. Something left the prince shocked. Oh no, the little baby peed on her father's hands. Could it have been just an accident? One of the maids called for help. Ruyan takes the baby back, asking her why she would do something like that in her father's arms. While a servant arrived with some clean cloths, the princess explained to him that this could be seen as a blessing or a gesture of affection. Zuzu was truly far too clever. The prince asked his wife if she had chosen a name for the child. She told him that she had chosen the beautiful name, Zhu Yuji, our little Princess Zuzu. Her husband apologizes, saying that his memory had been very poor lately. Zuzu was certain that he had been busy with his forbidden romance, forgetting even his daughter's name, yet remembering his lovers perfectly. Princess Ruyan fell silent. Then, while drying her daughter, she suggests that her husband go rest, for his health was very important. Zuzu begged her mother to wake up. Men like her father only behaved well out of self-interest. But before she could do anything, the prince approached his wife, thanking her for her understanding. Suddenly, Luby ran into the chambers, saying that there was a fire happening in the back of the palace. Then Ryan asked if anything had happened to the imprisoned old woman and the other child. The prince declared coldly that the princess should not concern herself with them. After all, she had just given birth, and it was the prince's duty to deal with that. Jimo and his mother fell silent upon seeing the change in the father's attitude. The young prince lets out a sigh and bids his mother farewell. Before he left, Ruyan called him closer. She declared that if he entered the court, she would support him completely. The princess's words caught her son by surprise. He remained silent for a few moments. Bringing his hands together in a respectful salute, he says that if one day he comes to power, it will be to bring justice to those who flee from it. Jimo explains that for now he has chosen not to walk the path of villainy. Ruyan looked at her son with concern, wishing to lighten his burden and that the road ahead of him would be less treacherous. Sometime later, in the imperial palace, while the princess cared for her daughter, Luby entered the room carrying a baby outfit. She informed the princess that the water used in the test had been adulterated, just as the two of them had suspected. And furthermore, the old woman did not survive the fire, but the child disappeared. Ruyan was now certain that it was some plan of her husband. Luby asks whether they should go after the missing child. The girl gently held the child's little arm. Zuzu was very satisfied to be wearing clean clothes now. She gave her mother a big smile as she said that the other child should be spared and that the sins of her parents should not affect her. Zuzu was deeply moved by her mother's kind words. How could anyone dare to call her a villain? The princess asks Luby to take her daughter to sleep, but before she left, something caught the girl's attention. Ruyan whispers to her to uproot all the weeds and eliminate all future threats. In the palace courtyard, the young prince watched the fire that was already being contained. He asks one of his servants to keep an eye on all the exits and to note everyone who left the palace, even though the servant told him that the princess would not want him to get involved in that. Ignoring the young man's words, Jimo said that unnoticed threats only generate more disasters. He needed to be ruthless and ordered his servant not to tell his mother anything. He asked the servant if he looked like a villain. The young man replied that he did not look like one at all, because his young master was just. The two men leave, while Jimo says that perhaps he had some talent for kindness. At night, in another palace, a young man slept deeply. He dreamed that he approached a cradle bathed in a mystical light, which was being watched by a woman and her maid. The woman told her maid that even if she adored that night pearl, she should not bite it while it slept. Thinking that she should not have let her see it when your highness presented it, the young man stared at the woman in astonishment while a baby cried in the cradle. His gaze seemed distant and lost, and he wondered what child that was. He felt his steps grow heavy. Summoning his courage, Ning approached. However, the boy was unable to react when, behind him, a figure approached. He quickly turned to see what it was. His eyes caught a great sword coming far too close. Ning is struck forcefully by a girl with lilac hair. She told him not to resist. He had ruined the empire, destroyed her family, and because of that, he could never dare to dream of marrying her. The girl vigorously moved the sword. She asked whether he thought being reborn would allow him to control destiny. The girl accused him of plotting all of that, but he would not control her existence. Ning asked what she was talking about. He tried at all costs to free himself from the sword. Suddenly, she released him. He was very weakened. Ning recognized that blade. That was a relic of his mother. He woke up extremely frightened. Ning sat up quickly, distressed by what he had just witnessed. The boy touched the sword that was beside him. But after all, who sleeps with a sword in their bed? Despite being very scared, he was relieved that it had been just a nightmare. He draws the sword, and while observing the blade, he wondered whether it had really been only a dream or a premonition. Suddenly, one of his servants enters his room, announcing that Master Mingai had returned. The young man fell silent at that information. Far from there, in another palace, Zuzu sneezed. Rian approached and asked her daughter if she had caught a cold. Zuzu thought that it had come too close, and how good it was that it had been just a dream. Unfortunately, her mother would not believe that in her dream, she grew up and became an assassin. The princess smiled lovingly at her daughter. Rian sang to her daughter, trying to distract her from the nightmare. She thought her daughter was very cute. We agree, right? Far from there, in another palace, Ning politely greeted Master Mingai. The old man asked the boy if he had questions to ask him. He noticed that Master Mingai let nothing slip by. Then, Ning told him that he had been having recurring dreams, in which a child did things he was unable to understand. Could that be a sign of things to come? The master calmly replied that sometimes the echoes of past lives pave the paths of the present life. That is, what was destined to happen could not be undone. The boy asked him if his destiny was already sealed. In his mind, he wondered whether in the future he would place a dagger in a girl's hands and she would make him meet his destiny. He politely thanked the master for his wisdom, but it was a shame that he truly did not believe in destiny. To him, destiny was something cowards tell themselves. Ning Huaimin had fought to return to life, and this time, anyone who stood in his way would deeply regret it. In his dream, he was already a grown man. Could that woman be a grown version of the baby? The boy remembered all the words from that dream, which meant that she was part of the Nanyue imperial family. She cursed him for things he had not even done yet. Or would he? The young prince walks through the courtyard, remembering that the kingdom of Nanyue and the northern court were in negotiations at the borders. Perhaps it was time for him to go visit. The master bids the boy farewell. 1 month later, there was a great celebration in the kingdom of Nanyue. The guests congratulated the prince and princess of the empire on the first month of life of their 5th daughter, Zuzu. Everyone praised how much she resembled her mother. In Ruyan's arms, Zuzu wondered whether that nonsense would never end. She felt that there was something strange in the air. She felt as if she was forgetting something important. What could it be? Suddenly, the arrival of the Empress is announced, and everyone bows in reverence to her. She asks everyone to rise, for that day marked 1 month of her niece's life, and there was no reason for so much formality. The Empress approached Zuzu, telling the baby that she was her aunt. Then, our protagonist remembered that Empress Liu Rukyang, her real aunt, would soon go through a drastic moment. She was terrified, thinking that a tragedy would soon happen to her aunt. The Liu family was very famous. Her aunt, Liu Rukyang, was no exception. She was a woman destined to become the furious white moonlight in the first part of the story. To secure the position and lineage of the crown prince, she was known for making concubines drink teas and potions that prevented them from having children. Meanwhile, the lamentable male protagonist of the first story, Sheng Heng, fell in love with a woman who was nothing more than a stand-in for Liu Rukyang. After ascending the throne, Sheng Heng suspected that Rukyang had harmed his beloved. Because of this, the furious white moonlight ended up being eliminated by her husband. Liu Rukyang looked at her niece with admiration, while Zuzu wondered how someone so beautiful could be so cruel. The author must have made a mistake. The Empress touched Zuzu's face, saying how beautiful it was that her forehead had a birthmark, a blessing from the Bodhisattva. Zuzu looked at her aunt with sparkling little eyes, greeting her mentally. Rukyang wondered if she had just heard her niece speak. She looked at the child even more astonished. Zuzu was distressed because she did not want to lose her aunt so soon, because of Sheng Heng. How could he discover that he was in love with her right before committing something terrible? Zuzu could no longer bear carrying that burden with her. Rukyang seemed to have been struck by lightning. The Empress was deeply shocked by the things she had discovered. How could her niece know such things? She remembered her marriage to Sheng Heng, and that the woman Zuzu mentioned lived in the isolated courtyard of the palace. Sheng Heng said he had sought her out only once. The noblewoman recalled with some bitterness that she had sacrificed much so that Sheng would remain on the throne, but while she worked tirelessly, he was seeking another woman, and even so, he wanted to eliminate her to be with the other. Ruyan asked her sister what was wrong with her. Zuzu was worried as well. Unexpectedly, Rukyang took her leave of her sister, saying that they should enjoy that night and use all the time they had to catch up. The princess was very happy. The Empress instructed one of her maids to have her entourage return to her palace and to inform the Emperor that she would spend the night at the Anping Palace. Now she was determined to remind the Emperor of the vows he himself had made. If a man wished to love a second woman, the solution was to remove her from the game. Zuzu was prepared to cry a lot to make her aunt stay, and for that reason she was astonished by how quickly she changed her mind. The baby was relieved that the woman had decided to stay of her own free will. Far from there, carriages were traveling toward the imperial city. A man quickly approached one of them. He informed Your Majesty that they were almost arriving at the capital. A young man opened the curtains, explaining that it was still very early and that they should continue the journey. The man explained that there were diplomatic negotiations underway, and if they entered the capital eagerly, it could send the wrong message to Nanyue. If it were their wish, they would send someone to escort them. The young prince said that he had not considered that point, and that it was a good idea for them to rest at an inn on the outskirts of the city. He closed the curtain. Ning asked the other young man if they were really going to all this trouble just to keep him out of the capital, right? Even so, he had to give them some credit, as they had waited an entire month before taking action. The prince said that keeping a low profile was always the best strategy. Ning asked the young man how the preparations were going. His advisor said that everything was ready and that he could rest easy. Ning felt relieved to hear that, because he knew it would be a sleepless night. During the celebration in Nanyue, the Empress's arrival was announced to the other guests. Suddenly, a girl approached the Empress and the princess. The girl asked the Empress to do her justice. The noblewoman was confused by the request and asked what had happened. She was the youngest daughter of one of the palace's intellectuals. She was very sad and trying to hold back her tears. The princess and Zuzu were in shock, but especially our protagonist, who had forgotten about the foolish things her brother used to do. Ever since her older brother had been named heir at a very young age, the prince kept him by his side under the excuse that it was for education. But in truth, he kept him in the company of women, raising his son to be useless. When he grew up, the third son indulged in drinking and debauchery, including nights in the empire's brothels. However, no one knew about this, only the prince, his father. But one night, during a banquet, he approached that girl inappropriately, trying to remove her clothes. However, the empress and the princess at first did not take the girl's accusations seriously, reprimanding her in front of the entire court. That night, unfortunately, the girl met her fate, and her family harbored immense resentment toward the imperial family, later orchestrating for the third prince to sleep with a concubine. Because of this, he was physically punished by the emperor, that was what Zuzu thought, communicating telepathically with her mother. While crying, the girl tried to explain to the two of them what had happened, which caught the attention of the princess consort. Rian called Luby to tell her something. What could it be? She gently approached the girl, saying that she understood her pain and asked whether she would mind going to talk privately with her and the empress in another hall. With tears in her eyes, the girl accepted. It was clear that she was a little frightened. Later, that same night, the third prince arrived at the hall, asking what his mother wished to speak with him about. The princess picked up a cup of tea. Unexpectedly, she threw the hot water at her own son. The furious princess asked him how he dared to behave in such a shameless way, even though he was so young. The prince tried to save his own skin, saying that the joke was innocent and that he did not really want to remove the girl's clothes. Was all of this really necessary? Zuzu thought triumphantly that he deserved that punishment, hoping that her mother would slap him. If he were not reprimanded, he could do something even worse. But Luby seized the opportunity to kick him, and the prince ended up falling to the ground in front of his mother and the girl. The princess apologized to the girl, claiming that she had failed to discipline her son, which had caused suffering to another person. She said that she would accept carrying out any punishment the girl wished. Meanwhile, her son scolded her for punishing him. He knelt down, and Rukyang intervened, asking the audacious young man whether he had forgotten that she was the empress and had authority over him. She ordered her guards to take the prince away because he had disrespected his superiors and ordered that he receive 20 lashes. Zuzu thought, serves him right. The girl looked anxiously at the prince as he was taken away by the imperial guards. The princess told her that tomorrow she would personally go to her family's home to apologize for her son's actions and ask for forgiveness. The girl explained that she did not expect the empress and the princess to support her in that situation, and since actions had already been taken, she would not pursue the matter further. Finally, the girl said that it was best for her to leave. The princess asked Luby to take Zuzu to sleep. Oh no. Right now, the maid took the child, but our protagonist really wanted to stay there to watch the drama. The princess ordered her guards to investigate everyone who was close to the third prince. She also declared to them that anyone caught trying to lead him to indulge his desires must be dismissed or removed immediately. Luby was taking Zuzu to sleep. The little one looked up at the sky, thinking that it had been some time since she had been trapped in that story and wondered whether she would ever be able to return to her previous life. At least, in this life, she had a mother who cared about her, but she missed her computer and her cell phone. The girl had clicked on that story out of pure curiosity because the protagonist of the book had the same name as hers. She lamented having made such a bad comment, calling the story a clown festival, until someone told her that if she thought it was so bad, she should go write a better story herself. Zuzu knew that if it were not for her stubbornness, she would not have ended up there in the middle of that tragedy. However, she noticed something strange there. Suddenly, a ninja fell from the ceiling. He quickly struck Luby's neck, knocking her unconscious. The ninja held the baby, thinking that he had almost dropped her. Another girl appeared and called the guards, warning that there was an intruder in the palace. Zuzu mentally said goodbye to her mother, thinking that the time they had spent together had been very good. She said farewell to that world full of lunatics and wondered where she would go now. That same night, everything seemed calm at the inn located outside the capital's gates. The sound of a creaking floor is something unusual. Then he advanced on tiptoe. Oh my god. A ninja picked up a long sword and aimed at his target. He drove the sword into the bed sheets. However, only feathers flew out from there. It seemed that his target was not there. The mysterious man pulled the sheet aside to see. He cursed Ning Huaimin, saying he was a cunning fox and had left the room long ago. The two ninjas assumed that he must have slipped into the city. In another part of the city, the other ninja was carrying Zuzu away from the palace. He turned and entered a dark alley under the cover of night. The palace guards did not even notice where that bastard ninja was hiding. He did not expect the royal family to act so quickly, for they had already closed all the city gates and sent guards after the intruder. The ninja knew that carrying a baby would slow him down, so he needed to find a place to hide her while the city was still being patrolled. Oh, a basket. Zuzu had already resigned herself to the kidnapping, but could he at least take his hand off her face? She could barely breathe. Finally, she broke free from him. However, before she could do anything, he shoved a little pastry into her mouth. Oh my god, she almost choked on it. The ninja placed Zuzu on the ground, even though she was clearly uncomfortable with the situation. And then, he covered her with the basket's lid. He left and abandoned her alone. But to our surprise, someone came walking silently. It was Ning. But what would he be doing out on the street at such an hour? He thought his disguise had fooled them, but after some time, he realized that the entire city was under lockdown. Ning then assumed it would be a good idea to hide for a while and spotted a basket. He gave the basket a few light taps. Suddenly, he began to hear some strange noises. Zuzu was very annoyed with her tiny little hands that made her escape difficult. Since she could not rely on them to get out, the other alternative was to scream wildly. But before she screamed, Ning lifted the basket and found her. Zuzu wondered, who was that young man? He stared at her for a few moments. She was confused by everything that was happening. Suddenly, Ning heard someone approaching and had an absurd idea. The boy grabbed the baby and immediately hid inside the basket together with Zuzu. He held her carefully, covering her small mouth so she would not cry. Meanwhile, our protagonist wondered if he was not being far too reckless. She wondered why he was doing that. Ning realized that after placing his hand over her mouth, it was as if he could hear her thoughts. How was that possible? Meanwhile, the ninjas were patrolling nearby. They were arguing because they had lost sight of Ning. Meanwhile, the young prince observed everything through a crack. As soon as they left, Ning lifted the basket. He looked around to see if they were really alone. Suddenly, Zuzu tugged at his clothes. She mentally asked if he could help her, since they were hiding there. She had already been kidnapped and taken far from home, and if he helped her, she would reward him. Ning was impressed by her secret ability, an inner voice that allowed her to communicate fluently with him. That made him remember that dream. He crouched down to talk to Zuzu and said that apparently both of them had been abandoned by their parents. But she was far too young, and he had no idea how he would take care of her. She said that she had a luminous pearl bigger than her fist. If she managed to split it in half, she would share one half with him. Meanwhile, Ning remembered the women's conversation in his dream about a child who had a magical pearl. The boy was lost in his thoughts. Ning replied to Zuzu that he did not even know where her home was, so perhaps he could take her to the capital's bureau. She was very grateful to that good Samaritan. He picked her up in his arms. However, they were found by the ninjas who were searching for them. The young prince was disappointed that they had only taken a walk around, or perhaps they were truly clever. Quickly, Ning searched for something in one of his pockets. He whispered to the baby, asking if she could hold her breath. If she understood him, nod her head. Zuzu signaled yes, and that she had already pretended to faint to escape even worse situations. Ning then asked her to hold her breath when he finished counting to 3. She did as he asked. He threw a smoke bomb into the air. The two of them were completely concealed. Despite holding her breath, the smoke really affected Zuzu. Sometime later, after their escape, Zuzu was very cold. It was a nightmare. Where had she been kidnapped to? She woke up in shock when she realized it was not a dream. That boy was also being pursued. Oh no. Could he be unconscious? Moving her small body, Zuzu tried to escape. The boy briefly woke up and asked her not to move too much. She immediately froze upon hearing him speak. Despite this, she was relieved to see that the young man was not unconscious. Zuzu noticed that he had red blotches on his shoulder. The boy whispered that he had some medicine. She could not understand what he was trying to say. Then the young man explained to her that he had some medicine in his front pocket. Zuzu then began to rummage through his pockets. Finally, she managed to find a vial. Our protagonist managed to get some medicine for him. She stuffed the medicine into his mouth. Zuzu hoped that he would not spit it out and that it would help him get better. Ning thought about how much that medicine was worth. A fortune. The night continued. The two were lying under the moonlight. Ning thought about how mischievous that little girl was, but in his dream, the older girl had left him heartbroken. The two of them were completely different. There was no way they could be the same person. Just look at those cute little cheeks. He was curious to touch her. Zuzu began to feel something strange. Looking at him with an angry expression, Zuzu asked Ning why he was squeezing her cheek. Ning kept squeezing her cheek for a few more moments. He thought that dawn would soon arrive, and that there was something very strange about that child. Meanwhile, Zuzu thought about the things she had already done since the beginning of the story. What she wanted most was for Ning to take her back home. The boy sat down on the ground, assessing what he would do next. Zuzu was impressed by how quickly he had recovered. Now, what he should do was hurry to take her safely back to the palace, but he simply stood up and walked away. She understood nothing. Feeling defeated, Zuzu began to cry, until Ning nudged her with his foot. He crouched down and asked why she was crying. She thought that he had abandoned her. The boy explained that he was going to come back to get her, and then footsteps could be heard nearby. The two sensed imminent danger and tried to protect themselves. But after all, what was happening? Zuzu, in all her innocence, thought that Ning had brought reinforcements. What would become of them in the next moments? She hugged him in pure gratitude. He thought that this was just what was missing, her completely misinterpreting the situation. Suddenly, Prince Jimo appeared, relieved to find his younger sister. The prince walked toward the suspicious young man who was holding Zuzu in his arms. With a stern expression, he asked the boy who he was and what he was doing with his sister. Zuzu telepathically told Ning that that man was her brother and that it would be better to hand her over to him, as she did not want to cause a scene. She asked the boy that they not start any unnecessary drama. Assuming a false identity, the boy introduced himself as Ning Chi and lied to the prince, saying that his family had a security agency and that he regretted that someone had kidnapped his younger sister. That name echoed in Jimo's thoughts. Then, the older prince declared that since he had saved his sister, he was indebted to the boy. But he had a question. If his family had a good business, how had he ended up there? Ning told the prince that his stepmother wanted to take his place, and because of that, he was in hiding. He had a sincere look of exhaustion, despite having told a lie. Or was there some degree of truth to it? The three returned safely to the palace, and the princess ran to receive her daughter. She quickly took the baby into her arms, asking if she was all right, who had kidnapped her, and what had happened there. Meanwhile, Ning paid closer attention to the princess holding Zuzu. So that dream was real. That had truly happened. The truth was that this child would one day become the woman who would bring about his end in his dream. Zuzu was almost falling asleep from sheer relief. Her mother looked at her with tenderness. Zuzu was crying with joy at being back in her mother's arms. All of this thanks to the little boy who saved her from the streets of the capital. The princess told the boy that she owed him an immeasurable debt for rescuing her daughter. Then, she invited him to spend some time with them there at the palace. Zuzu telepathically told him to accept. With a smile on his face, Ning accepted the invitation. As they walked toward the palace, he was determined not to hold back this time. Princess Ruyan explained to Ning that the servants would soon prepare something for him, but they were interrupted by Chao Sheng, who arrived suddenly and seemed disconcerted to see that the baby was back. He was quite distressed, and told his wife that as soon as he learned of their daughter's abduction, he returned immediately. He asked whether the culprits had already been captured. He almost looked like a caring father, but Zuzu knew the whole truth. Our protagonist turned to her mother and communicated mentally, revealing that the Prince of Enping was responsible for her kidnapping. Apparently, her terrible father did not know how to deal with her cunning, and unfortunately, she was still too small to be able to speak. The princess seemed lost in her thoughts. Using her cunning, the princess told her husband that the kidnappers had escaped, but had left behind some physical evidence. The prince, surprised, asked what that evidence was. While the family talked, Ning noticed that the prince did not seem excited about having his daughter back, and clearly the princess knew this, but made an effort to play the role of a loving wife. A Machiavellian father, a mother who hides her thoughts, a brother with his own plans, and a little girl who seems innocent but clearly knows a lot. That family truly was great entertainment for Ning. Zuzu looked to the side, searching for something. She mentally asked the boy why he was suddenly starting to look like a classic villain. While the prince tried to ask about the supposed evidence, the princess asked him not to worry about that now, as the baby was still very frightened. He apologized to his wife and asked who that young man with them was. Ruyan introduced Ning as the boy who had saved their daughter. If it were not for him, Zuzu would not have managed to return home safely. The prince said that then everything was thanks to that young boy. He declared that since Ning was his daughter's savior, he could make himself comfortable in the palace, and if he needed anything, he only had to ask. Ning thanked the prince. Sometime later, already inside the palace, someone threw a stone far away. Prince Chao Sheng was deeply frustrated that his plans had failed. His first idea had been to get rid of Zuzu, leave his wife in mourning, and then later adopt Yulen's child as consolation for Ruyan. But that foolproof plan had been ruined by some random brat. The most intriguing part was that Ruyan had mentioned some evidence. Could those clues lead back to him? He let out an annoyed sigh and decided that instead of staying still and risking being discovered, it would be better to strike first. The prince was very upset at not having gotten what he wanted. Filled with malice, he thought that if Ruyan succumbed to a strong fever, his problems would be over. A dove approached the room where Ning was. It landed gently on his hand. The bird brought a message saying that the northern court was using the prince's disappearance as an excuse to refuse to enter the city. Meanwhile, Nanyue was actively searching for him. As he suspected, the northern court was using his disappearance as an excuse to declare war. In his past life, they had used the decline of a diplomat as a pretext to attack them. Since he had infiltrated the city earlier than expected, they would use the disappearance as an excuse to delay entering the capital. Meanwhile, Nanyue would do the impossible to prove its innocence. years, trying to find him. Ning sent the dove back, thinking about how all those diplomats were willing to destroy peace, while he would do everything to maintain it. Interrupting his thoughts, Luby called the boy to speak with the princess consort. She led him to her chambers. Luby politely asked him to wait a moment while she went to speak with her. But before he could ask what that conversation was about, he saw Zuzu trying to climb down from a table. He was astonished by how mischievous she was. Unfortunately, her short little legs still could not reach the floor. Oh no, Zuzu was about to fall. The boy quickly stretched out his hands to catch her, and skillfully caught her in midair before any accident could happen. Using her magical telepathy, Zuzu told the boy that her mother was inside picking out some clothes for him, so it would be good to wait a little. The baby handed him a large green pearl, leaving Ning very surprised. Zuzu wanted to give him the large pearl at all costs. He took the large pearl, asking if that gift was really for him. Ning knew how much she valued that precious item, but Zuzu gave it to him anyway, without hesitation. Could she really be the woman he saw in his dream? Deep down, he greatly hoped that Zuzu and that woman were not the same person. They had only met twice, so why was he growing attached to her? Could it be some twist of fate if he allowed his heart to grow attached to her? Would he fall in love with Zuzu? Without realizing it, his hand began to slip. Oh no, the baby was falling. Luckily, she did not get hurt, but she was quite annoyed that he had let her go. After all, she was not heavy or anything. Before the princess consort arrived, Ning noticed that Prince Chaosheng was beside him. The boy politely greeted the prince, who replied that since he had saved his daughter, there was no need for so much formality. Secretly, the prince was relieved that Rian had not arrived yet. The prince knelt down and told Zuzu that he had a little gift for her. He showed her a beautiful head ornament. Chaosheng began to place the jewel on his daughter's head, but he had no idea how clever Zuzu was. The child quickly threw the jewel far away, surprising the prince. Then Zuzu began to bite her father's arm, even though she did not have a single tooth. The truth was that she knew that jewel was poisoned and that it would make her sick. While biting her father, she thought about how much he wanted to make her fall ill along with her mother, so he could get rid of both of them. How dared he be such an obvious antagonist? Ning picked Zuzu up in his arms, and the prince was deeply stunned, wondering how such a small child could see through his actions. He became quite furious. Then Xiaosheng remembered the words of an elder who had revealed to him in the past that the daughter he had with Liu Ruyan was an extraordinary child, and that it was best for him to be cautious around her. Could that be true? The prince was determined not to allow Zuzu and Ruyan to continue being part of his life. Meanwhile, Ning wondered how the baby knew that the jewel was poisoned. Was she capable of seeing the future? Would she also be able to uncover his plans? Finally, Princess Ruyan arrived to speak with the young man. Before she could say anything, the prince ran away. What a bizarre fellow. She watched her husband leave. Ruyan told Ning that she had some clothes belonging to her son that should fit him. The young man could wear them while his new clothes were being prepared. Ning thanked the princess for her kindness. He returned to her the large green pearl that Zuzu had given him. Bowing politely, he explained to the noblewoman that he had some matters to attend to and asked to take his leave. As he walked away, the boy thought that since things would not end well for him and Juyushi, that kindness made him feel slightly uncomfortable. Ruyan asked her daughter what was wrong with him. Zuzu replied mentally that perhaps the size of the pearl had not been big enough. The young man walked out of the palace, but someone called him by his true name. Jimo approached, revealing that the entire Nanyue Empire was searching for the 7th prince of Beian. Then, he asked whether Ning was certain it was a good idea to continue hiding in the Anping Palace. Ning asked out of pure curiosity. If the prince had already recognized him earlier, why did he decide not to expose him? With a polite smile, Jimo explained that regardless of logic or sentiment, the boy had saved his sister, and the Anping royal house owed him. Ning asked the prince not to worry, because when the time came, he would leave. The next day, Luby walked to one side while Ning handled a small wooden box. Inside the small object were some tiny grains that contained no detectable traces of poison, yet the herbs combined there were incompatible with one another, which would cause a lethal reaction. The boy pondered that if Zuzu truly could see the future, she would know that he had drugged her. Otherwise, it would be the best possible outcome. He asked the girl whether Yan Yu was in the royal pavilion. She replied that the princess had left for the palace that very day. Ning was satisfied with that information. Then, she asked him whether he needed any help from the princess. At that moment, she was not at home. The boy apologized, explaining that he had forgotten that detail, and said that he would return later. Zuzu, while listening to the conversation, spotted her friend. The baby began calling him, making baby-like sounds. Ning told the girl that it would be an honor to come in for a few moments. Zuzu pointed to a box right in front of her and asked him to open it. He stretched out his hand to take the gift, hiding one of the grains in it. The boy discreetly dropped one of them into the jug of milk. Ning asked Zuzu, "What is this now?" Did she want to give him another gift? Telepathically, Quickly, she replied that perhaps the pearl last time had not been big enough, and now she was giving him everything she had. She insisted that he accept it, because now they were officially siblings from different parents, so he should not find it strange that she was being kind to him. Then, she asked him to hand her the jug. Ning gave a smile that concealed his malice. He picked up the jug of milk and offered it to the child, who was glowing with joy. Or was it affection? The two stared at each other for a few moments, and Zuzu seemed to shine with happiness as she looked at him. She explained to him that there would be a ceremony to celebrate their sibling bond, in which they would seal a pact with milk. Since that was the case, Ning had to take a big gulp from the jug of milk. Zuzu made an encouraging gesture, a big thumbs up. Oh no, it seems Ning set a trap for himself. Ning was very embarrassed and asked Zuzu not to joke about that, because it was her daily portion of milk and it would not be right for him to accept it. Luby appeared and intervened in the situation, saying that it was just goat's milk and that he could drink it without worry. Zuzu asked angrily if he was belittling her. She made it very clear that she would consider it a lack of respect if he did not drink it. With slightly trembling hands, he picked up the jug of milk. He really did not want to do that, but in a single impulse, Ning drank all the milk, poison and all. He slammed the jug back onto the table with great force, leaving Zuzu in shock. Not a single drop was left. Zuzu was stunned that he had drunk the entire portion of milk, which was her whole daily portion. Did he know the emotional impact of a baby seeing someone drink all of her milk? At that moment, Zuzu was just a child who no longer had her daily milk. Ning stood up and rushed out the bedroom door, leaving the little girl completely confused. Our little protagonist wondered if he had gotten angry at her because of that. She was only playing with him and did not expect him to become so sensitive about it. Ning ran desperately into his room. He threw himself onto the bed, searching for something among the sheets. Phew, what a relief. The boy found an antidote. He took it before it was too late and collapsed exhausted onto the bed. We agree that that was enough adrenaline for today. Ning was frustrated that the little girl always seemed to succeed in ruining his plans. He closed his eyes to rest, thinking that his efforts had not been in vain, considering that from her thoughts, Zuzu had not suspected that he had tried to hurt her. However, he had lost a good opportunity, and perhaps now it was time to leave. He let out a deep sigh. The night was calm. Ning Huimin was sleeping deeply when a shadow approached him. He opened his eyes and saw something coming closer. When he opened his eyes once again, Zuzu was staring at him. Ning was badly startled. However, Zuzu had only asked if he was okay. Still shaken by the scare, he asked what she was doing there. Zuzu told him that she had learned he had not eaten dinner that night, and so she decided to go see how he was. She then noticed that he had some purplish marks on his neck. Jumping on top of him, Zuzu asked if Ning was sick. With her small hands, she investigated what that could be, but the boy struggled to answer that he was just allergic to goat's milk. Letting go of the hood of his clothes, Zuzu apologized to him, claiming that she did not know the extent of her strength. She was furious at the goat for daring to give him an allergy. However, before she realized it, Ning fell asleep again and did not answer her. The child rolled over beside him and fell asleep. A little later, Ning opened one eye. He noticed that she had fallen completely asleep while talking. Moreover, she seemed to have a lot of strength for such a small child. Before he could do anything, she punched him while sleeping. Giving up on staying there, Ning got out of bed, leaving Zuzu alone. He looked at her once more before leaving the room. There was no one else in the room, so he wondered if he could hide her under the sheets. But his plan was ruined because behind him, Prince Jimo asked what he was doing awake at such an hour of the night and whether he would like to go admire the moon. Ning let out a sigh and thought how unfortunate that situation was. He turned to Jimo and said that the prince seemed to be in a very good mood and asked to schedule looking at the moon another time because his men had been waiting for him for 2 days. The two young men said their farewells that night. Jimo looked at his sister, who was sleeping deeply on Ning's bed. He gently touched her little nose, whispering how she had caused quite a mess. The next day, the princess asked her son why Ning had left so suddenly. Jimo told her that he must have gone to deal with some urgent family matter, since he did not even say goodbye to Zuzu. The princess came to see her daughter, who greeted her with joy. Mother and daughter hugged, touching each other's faces. Zuzu asked her mother where Ning was. Jimo approached the two of them and confessed that he had bad news for his little sister. He patted her head and told her that Ning had gone away, but the little girl could not understand what had happened. Ning had seemed so well the night before. She was lamenting that irreparable loss. Jimo comforted his sister, saying that he had returned to his family and made up a story that the young man had gone to compete with his stepmother over a family inheritance. Zuzu was upset that they had not told her earlier. Our protagonist hugged her mother even tighter. The little one was devastated at the thought that she would never see Ning again. Zuzu was very upset. Suddenly, she looked around with an angry expression. Her brother and her mother could not understand what had caused her change in mood. And then, they spotted Prince Chao Sheng arriving. The princess asked, What was the reason for that visit? Her husband replied that the priests of the Qingyun temple were there to deal with an urgent matter. The prince said that it was a very important temple, where the emperor had been born, and that it should be treated with such importance. He invited the priest and his son to enter. Ryan, with an annoyed expression, asked the man what was the reason for that rare visit. He told the princess that his master had detected the birth of a cursed star a month ago. After a long investigation, they had been led there. The princess asked him what he meant by a cursed star. Suddenly, everyone understood who he was talking about, and they looked at little Zuzu. She was quite confused. The prince asked the priest how his daughter could be a cursed star. Surely it was all a misunderstanding. The man argued that those stars were difficult to find, but the night before he had seen something. Chao Sheng said that it would reveal itself that night, and they would perform the ritual together, and when the time came, they would know who it was. Furious, Ruyan asked her husband how he could know whether the priest was telling the truth. He argued that precisely because of that, they should confirm it, all for Zuzu's safety. While he spoke, she remembered that later on, besides betraying the family, he would go on to betray the empire, becoming a spy of the Yin Kingdom infiltrated in Nanyue. Zuzu telepathically confessed to her mother that Chao Sheng would later hire priests to spread rumors that the imperial family's fortune was ending, which would weaken all of them. The princess was shocked by that information. How could her husband be so cruel? Taking Zuzu with her, she told her husband and the priest that they could do as they pleased. She would withdraw to rest. In his own palace, Ning Huaimin asked whether the prince had really brought priests to the palace. He was surprised by that information, because even a tiger would not eat its own cubs. Could it be that Chao Sheng was using Zuzu as bait to prove their theory? A servant asked Ning whether they should send someone to stop the ritual, but the boy simply replied that he would love for someone else to deal with that walking headache for him. Instead, he wanted to ask something different of the servant, to throw more fuel on that fire. That night, the moon was high in the sky. Everyone there was ready, and the priest announced that he was about to begin the ritual. Zuzu was certain that Taoist would do everything within his power to get rid of her. Chao Sheng was about to ask something of the priest. But before he could finish his sentence, the general arrived at the palace, giving orders for the guards not to allow anyone to leave. The prince asked him, what was the city patrol doing there? The imperial general had received a message from the priests of the Qingyun temple, saying that a tragedy would occur that night because a cursed star would arrive. By decree of the emperor, the palace was under lockdown, and the general was in charge. Looking at the princess, who was in shock, the prince was satisfied with how his plans were progressing. For if they saw Zhu Yuji as an omen of disaster, not even the princess could protect her. The Taoist master took a yellow paper talisman with red writing. He threw the paper into the air. When it fell to the ground, it began to catch fire. The flames began to grow more rapidly, frightening everyone there. Suddenly, something began to form within the fire. The general realized that it was the number 5. Could that have something to do with the 5th daughter of the Zhu family? Would she be an omen of disaster? Oh my god, how boring. Zuzu was very annoyed by that ridiculous little performance. Taking advantage of the situation, the prince asked the general for mercy and said that all of it was a mistake. His daughter was not responsible for any evil. The general declared that the prince should take the matter up with the emperor. The general knocked the prince to the ground and turned to call his guards. Secretly, Chao Sheng gave a satisfied smile. What a bastard. However, the others realized that the fire had not yet been extinguished. Everyone cautiously approached the fire to see what else was forming. Zuzu remembered well the legend that said that when a divine maiden ascended, all disasters would be dispelled. Therefore, the 5th daughter was not the harbinger of any calamity, for she was the maiden of the prophecy. The princess was very proud of her daughter. That afternoon in the imperial pavilion, hours before the ritual, Jimo checked the priests who claimed to be from Qingyun. However, the temple was very far away, and thus they would not have confirmation of the information in time. Ruyan was devastated, realizing that her husband would do anything to get rid of their daughter. They let out long sighs, thinking about what they could do. The prince asked his mother where Zuzu was. Everything was so quiet there. Sitting in her cradle, Zuzu displayed a very, very irritated expression. What could possibly upset someone so small? The two decided to gently pat her head. However, the princess and her eldest son were not prepared for the flood of intense thoughts coming from the baby. She was worried about surviving and exposing her father without cheating, and she needed to rely on her own cunning. The two looked at each other and understood that the little one had a plan. Jimo asked what his mother thought about them getting ahead of things and declaring that she was a divine girl, just as a precaution in case those Taoists were truly after Zuzu. He also revealed that he had found evidence that the prince had hired them and given them flammable paper. Zuzu was impressed with her brother being so astute. It was as if someone had read the script to him. Ryan told her son that if that was the case, then if they wanted an omen of chaos, she and her son would give them a divine girl. Our protagonist imagined what it would be like when she was shining in front of those bastards. However, she found it very strange the way her mother and brother were speaking, as if they were two actors performing with dramatic pauses for effect. Why were they stroking her head? Back to the present moment, Zuzu was shining like a magical divinity. She wondered how she could be involved in all of that. The little girl raised her hand and pointed forward. To no one's surprise, she was pointing directly at the prince, who had no idea what that meant. Unexpectedly, one of the flames climbed up the prince's robes, frightening him. He was deeply stunned, not knowing how to interpret the situation. Yes, cruel prince, your plans are sinking once again. Secretly, Ruyan was holding some of the flammable liquid. The princess, displaying a fearful expression, asked everyone whether the omen of chaos might not be the prince himself. While some fled in fear, Zuzu pointed decisively at her father. She was very satisfied, thinking that at that point, no one would believe the prince anymore. He bowed before her, asking her to release him, and saying that she would not want the emperor to intervene. Would she? His arrogance was unbelievable. Chao Sheng fell silent for a few moments. Suddenly, he stood up and, pretending to have lost his memory, asked his wife what he was doing there and why there were so many people in the palace courtyard. Zuzu thought that if life was a stage, she was absolutely nailing that performance. The general wondered whether that divinity was real. Outside the palace, one of the men who had been present at the ritual ran toward a carriage that was parked nearby. Prince Ning analyzed how an omen of chaos had turned into a divinity. He had originally given the tip to Emperor Yue, hoping to fan the flames even more, but instead, he had ensured the little girl's success. Ning asked the man where the city patrol was at that moment. He replied that they had just returned to the palace to request an imperial decree. The boy said that they could wait a bit to see how the prince's plans would deal with that so-called divine girl. He thought about how difficult it must be to be her, because if she failed, someone could get hurt. 1 hour later, the general gathered everyone to read the imperial decree. Zuzu was anxious to know whether everything would happen according to the original plot. After the ceremony, her father would be sent to negotiate with the northern nations. If it happened as she expected, Chao Sheng would be ruined and sent to prison, which would be a perfect descent into disaster. The general read the decree, which stated that with the imminent peace negotiations between the two nations, Prince Chao Sheng would accompany the minister to negotiate with the northern nations. Phew, it happened exactly as Zuzu remembered. However, she and her mother were caught by surprise when they heard that Zuzu, due to her divine powers, would be allowed to enter the palace to bless the engagement ceremony. Mother and daughter stared at each other. How would the two of them deal with that? Zuzu wondered where that peace agreement had come from. That was not in the original story at all. She remembered that before, the fake baby scheme had failed, but her father managed to escape with his lover. That helped him avoid the negotiations, and the divine girl plan never happened. It was incredible how her arrival had changed the story she had been reading. Ruyan thought that if those negotiations were doomed to fail, sending Zuzu would be a great danger. She asked the general if the negotiations had not already ended. What was the reason for such a drastic change? The man explained to the princess that the emperor had his reasons, and his duty was to follow the decree. Chao Sheng asked to accompany the general to the exit. Ruyan, Jimo, and Zuzu exchanged glances for a few moments. Why did they feel that something was very wrong? Jimo asked his mother if she had heard about the disappearance of the Yin prince from the northern nations. She was surprised to learn that, as she thought they had sent a symbolic envoy to the negotiations. Jimo revealed that the emperor must know that all of that was a facade, so why create turmoil involving their father and Zuzu? That was very strange. He explained that Zuzu would be dragged into political schemes, becoming a threat to the throne. That was a risk she should never accept. In short, if something happened to her, her father would also suffer. The young prince hoped that this was not a lost cause, depending on how they acted. Knowing his father, Jimo knew that he must have already discovered everything. But the question was, what would he do with that information? Suddenly, Ruyan and her children heard someone shouting that there was an assassin in the palace. Zuzu realized that the plot had completely gone off the rails. The princess asked her son if there was someone else planning to take Zuzu away. He asked his mother to calm down, as there were still patrol guards around and the assassin would not appear out of nowhere. However, Jimo was worried that the guards would not catch the suspect. Zuzu had already figured everything out. Most likely her father had devised yet another evil plan. Ruyan said that if her husband was capable of staging a tragedy to escape the negotiations, then Zhu Yuji would be equally capable. Jimo reminded her that there had been a very sudden outbreak of illness in the capital that affected some children. Surely Chao Sheng would not question a twist like that? Zuzu said that she owed a lot to her villain parents, as she had learned a lot from them. However, the princess was worried that her daughter might truly fall ill. Our little protagonist was willing to pretend that she had met her destiny in order to cooperate with her mother's and older brother's plans. Sometime later, Luby ran over to the princess. While Ruyan fanned the baby in her cradle, the girl warned her that Prince Chao Sheng had sent someone to visit Zhu Yuji. He was outside now, and they had been unable to stop him. Ruyan was very upset by that information, as she had warned everyone that her daughter was ill and would not receive visitors. While touching Zuzu's face, the princess ordered that he be told to inform his prince that her daughter was none of his concern. Something caught the princess by surprise. Zuzu had a very high fever. In another dimension, Zhu Yuji was unconscious in the darkness, and she was a grown young woman. She seemed to be deeply asleep. Then she opened her eyes. Zuzu was now a beautiful teenage princess. She asked where she was. Who was that man in front of her? The girl tried to call out to him. Finally, she seemed to realize that she was grown up in that world. She stood up, trying to understand what kind of dream that was. The young man, hearing her voice, turned to look at her more closely. He looked at Zuzu, who seemed very surprised to be there. She walked cheerfully toward him, asking how he had leveled up as well. However, his gaze was not friendly at all. The mysterious man walked toward the girl. Zuzu was greeting him, still seeming somewhat confused. Oh no, he wounded her badly. She could not understand the reason for that. She wondered what kind of madman would do that to her in her dream. The boy pushed her into the water, and Zuzu looked at him with a furious expression as she fell. That was her dream, and she could hardly wait to respawn. The young princess sank into the cold, dark waters. She opened her eyes again. What a surprise. She was back in the same mysterious place as before. Zuzu touched her own stomach, wondering what had happened. Did she really respawn? Was that some kind of checkpoint? The girl turned around, looking for the save point of that world. She had barely arrived when she found him again. Oh no, him again. Then she was wounded for the second time, and he threw her into the water again. Oh my god, what was the reason for that intense dream loop? A few moments later, Zuzu was back in the same place as before. But finally, she had an idea. Before the boy's dagger could strike her, she grabbed his arm. The two were locked in a half-struggle, and Zuzu gave it everything she had to defend herself. She gave him a cunning look, saying that this time she had read his movements. The two fought aggressively. Finally, Zuzu managed to get away from him. She told him that she did not know why he kept appearing in her dream, but she wanted him to stop hurting her every time. He had already done that 3 times in total. The girl said that she would even let it go, but for what reason? If he did not like her, he should go hurt himself. There was no reason for him to take it out on her. The boy looked at the dagger, thinking that by that point the blade should have already pierced him. Suddenly, someone called out to him in his thoughts. He thought that he had truly been struck. Zuzu said that this was her dream, and perhaps he had already hurt her several times. What she did not know was that he remembered that dream very well too. Zuzu began to step back while he said that since he was holding the dagger, he could then... She asked him to relax and said it would be best for them to stop that, or they would be trapped in that loop forever. The boy asked why she had not stopped him the second time. Since she remembered, Zuzu asked if he thought she wanted to be hurt, rewinding the tape. Every time she respawned, his knife was already right in front of her. She asked if that was a matter of destiny. Zuzu remembered that in some dramas, stories started that way, with characters hurting each other in dreams. But in real life, they knew each other and were bound by karma or fate. The boy then thought that the girl from the dream had a spot-on intuition. He decided to suggest that they find a way out of there. Zuzu noticed that despite his handsome face, the boy did not know how to find the exit from his own dream. She was very curious to see how she looked now that she was grown. So the girl decided to look into the waters. She crouched down for a few moments to see better. Zuzu was impressed by what she saw. Her hair was long and silky, and her large golden eyes stood out beautifully. Our protagonist felt fabulous. She decided that no man was worthy of her, and that she chose to fall in love with herself. The boy behind her thought that was ridiculous. Suddenly, time began to change, and Zuzu asked him if the dream was ending. She stretched out her hand to try to reach him. However, they drifted apart too quickly, and she could not... Oh no, where was Zuzu being taken? Suddenly, she woke up, but she was not the same as in the dream, and she was no longer a baby. Beside her, leaning against the bed, a boy said that his sister had finally woken up. Who could he be? Before she could ask him anything, the boy ran off, saying that he would call his master. Zuzu was very frightened. Where was her mother? Where was she? What kind of dream was that, where you woke up in another universe? Finally, an elderly man entered and told her that he was relieved she had woken up because he thought there was no longer any way to save her. The old man approached, and a third person arrived in the room. He came closer and introduced himself as Master Li of Valley Medicine and asked the little girl if she knew why she was there. Zuzu recognized Ning. Behind the master, Ning looked around in a carefree manner. Suddenly, she sat up in bed. She stretched out her small arms, and then she threw herself into the arms of Ning Huaimin, who looked very confused. The other boy asked what the little girl was trying to say. After all, how did those two know each other? Zuzu noticed that Ning seemed older than before. He was astonished that he could hear her thoughts, even though she had not said anything to him. Still, it felt slightly familiar to him. Ning asked the little girl if she knew him. Our little protagonist was quite upset by that question. The truth was that she was heartbroken because he acted as if she were a stranger. She was deeply shaken. How could he have forgotten the terrible and wonderful moments they had shared together, even if only for a few days? Ning told Master Li that he had many questions since the moment he woke up. Meanwhile, in his arms, Zuzu cried a lot. He asked who exactly that 3-year-old little girl was. That took Zuzu by surprise. What did he mean that 3 years had passed? How was that possible? No wonder she could not speak properly. However, in the dream she had, she was already a teenager. How could that be happening? She thought she was still trapped in some crazy dream and begged herself to wake up. The master began to speak. He asked Jing, the golden-eyed boy, to read the princess's letter to Ju Yuji. He asked the master if the child would truly understand. Jing took the letter and read its contents for a few moments. The princess had written to her daughter that shortly after she fell into a coma, she had no other alternative but to send her to the best doctor possible, who was Master Li of the Valley. As his disciple, she would have to learn a great deal, and as soon as she recovered, her mother would come to take her back. Zuzu missed her mother very much. Jing, trying to comfort his sister, gently patted the child, and suddenly he was overwhelmed by an intense wave of her thoughts, saying that she did not want to learn anything from anyone, but rather wanted to go back home. He was very impressed. Had he heard his sister's inner voice again? The boy began to tell her that besides medicines, they also made poisons and some special techniques. But his master scolded him, saying that Zuzu was just a child, and that he should not frighten her like that. The master turned to Ning and told the boy that he had been sent by Master Mingai so that he could recover. Since he was older, he would be responsible for the little one. Ning then asked what kind of illness he had. To everyone's surprise, the old man replied that he had a serious case of stupidity. But Ning was not shaken and asked if that was why he had lost part of his memory. Master Li was impressed that he knew that information. Zuzu thought it was a classic case of amnesia, the highlight of melodrama novels. Ning said that as soon as Zuzu saw him, she ran to him with sparkling eyes, begging for a hug. Clearly she knew him, but he did not remember her. Our protagonist complained that it was not a hug, but that she was demanding his attention. The elderly man realized that the boy was very intelligent, just as Master Mingai had told him, but he still could not say something. That in truth, Master Mingai had asked him to seal Ning Huaimin's memories. Master Li felt a bit embarrassed. Before the youths could say anything, the elderly master ran off. Ning placed Zuzu back on the bed, and Jing seemed completely lost. The boy turned to the two of them, introduced himself as Jing Ye, and said that he was usually near the main hall if they needed anything. Ning introduced himself with his false surname, as Ning Qi. He was not entirely sure why he had used that surname, nor why that name had simply come to his mind. Ignoring Ning completely, Jing turned to Zuzu and told the little girl that if she needed anything, she just had to go look for him. Finally, Zuzu remembered that Jing Ye was the third protagonist of the third book. She knew that at the beginning of the story, he was the typical young noble, gentle and fragile. Every time the heroine was hurt by the male protagonist, Jing appeared with a first aid kit. However, he became dark. The truth was that he fed the girl a little poison in every medicine. He did not want to end her immediately, but rather make her suffer her entire life. The revelation was so shocking that it even shook Zuzu's modern values. Why did he hate her so much? Perhaps he had something against the Ju family, but the story never explained it, and he ended up being destroyed by the protagonist. Ah, what a chaotic plot. The authors did not even tie up the loose ends, and now Zuzu was trapped in that world. Our little protagonist was praying that the spirits of heaven and earth would help her understand everything that was happening, and that Jingye would not discover that she was part of the Ju family. However, since Jing was hearing her thoughts, he wondered what heroine she was talking about. What was that resentment? What was the Ju family? He knew nothing about that. The boy approached Zuzu while she thought about how Jing gave her chills and that Ning was the only decent person there, her only hope. But before he could touch her, Jing placed his hand in front. He warned that Ning should go rest and that he would take Zuzu with him. The boy did not even try to stop him. As Ning left, Jing advised the little one never, ever to trust any man. Not a single one. At night, the moon shone in the sky. Ning woke up suddenly. He kept insisting to himself that he could not remember anything. How had he simply left Beiyin and arrived at that place? Quite frustrated, he lay down on the bed, wondering why Master Mingi had left him there. In the past, the master tried to convince the emperor that the seventh prince was not a demon. Ning remembered the paternal affection that the master had for him, thinking about how he would never let the boy be harmed, protecting him even from his own father. If it were not for him, Ning would not have survived. Even so, he continued to feel that those lost memories were the key to explaining everything that had happened. He remembered when he had talked to Zuzu earlier that day. Something surprised him greatly. He sat up in bed again, remembering that since he was very young, he had been locked in a tower and had never set foot in Nanyue. How could that little girl have recognized him? If he wanted to recover his memories, perhaps she could help him with that. Still that night, Zuzu was lying in her bed. She could not sleep at all. The little girl tossed and turned from one side of the bed to the other because she missed her mother terribly. And all her bravado turned into a single thought. Why was fate doing this to her? She was just a little girl who missed home. The heroine in the third book was that green-eyed baby, the result of her father's infidelity with his lover, who was his true love. In the original story, she would assume the identity of Ju Yuji. However, there was one thing. Zuzu had changed the course of the narrative and kept her own identity. What would she do if the tragic story of that character turned toward her? It was just one more day that she needed to survive. Suddenly, someone slowly opened the window of her room. Zuzu heard the creaking sound. Suddenly, Ningqi was coming in. She was bothered by that sudden entrance in the dead of night, interrupting her emotional drama. What could he want now? Quickly, Ning explained to her that he wanted to know how the two of them knew each other, because he wanted to understand his lost memories. He said that she could use gestures if she needed to, and that he would do his best to understand. Zuzu paused for a few moments. Picking up an imaginary microphone, she began to narrate that their story together involved a mutual rescue. He was a very attractive boy who was being mistreated by his stepmother, and she was a little girl abandoned by her peers. Amid chaos and danger, a wicker basket united them, and they worked together to save themselves. And from then on, destiny took over. When the assassin sent by his stepmother tried to poison him, she gave him a magical medicine that saved his life all at once. After that, Ning temporarily went to live with Zuzu and her family, but that peace did not last long. And then he left her alone to go inherit a billion-dollar family business. Heartbroken but determined, Ning thought that story was very crazy. Zuzu explained that she had taken some artistic liberties in the story, but the facts had not been invented by her. Ning was confused because his father's concubines could indeed be his stepmothers, but they did not even pay attention to him. Why would they hurt him? Besides, his father was very well and alive, so how could he have been harmed? He became very worried. Was there something wrong with his brain? The boy let out a shout that startled Zuzu. He asked what she thought she was doing. The little girl jumped into his arms and said that he seemed very different from before, and in fact, much more handsome now. He was left speechless by the compliment. Then he was swept by a sudden wave of shyness, even turning a little red. He asked if she had no shame speaking so directly to him. Ning told her not to approach any guy like that out of nowhere. It was very inappropriate. Suddenly, Zuzu seemed to find him even more charming, a true tsundere. She noticed how the amnesia seemed to bring out some secret traits, but Ning was still confused, not knowing what a tsundere was. Outside the room, Jingye was calling Zuzu. When he entered the room, he found Ning and the little girl sitting on the bed. That made him very furious. Quickly, he grabbed a piece of bamboo. Shouting at the top of his lungs, he yelled at Ning, asking how he dared to enter a young lady's room in the middle of the night. The boy replied that he was just trying to understand how the two of them knew each other. If Jingye did not believe him, he just had to ask. But to both of their frustration, Zuzu was deeply asleep. Before the fight could escalate, the two stopped to look at her. 3 years later, at the foot of a mountain, someone shouted for the others to run because she was coming. People ran desperately, afraid that she would make them taste poison again. Behind them, someone walked calmly. Zuzu, now older, wondered why people ran when they saw her coming. Then she warned Aunt Lee and invited her to try a new medicine she was developing. The woman accidentally dropped a bucket with some clothes. She turned to say that everything was fine, and that the one who was not feeling very well was actually... Zuzu asked, "Who could it be?" The old woman pointed to her little dog, Fugi. Zuzu picked him up in her arms and asked if he had already been neutered. She had learned a new technique for the farm pigs, completely painless. Snatching Fugi from the girl's arms and running away, Aunt Lee told the girl that he had not yet had the chance to be a father, and that she should test her methods on another dog. Zuzu said that she was just trying to help, but those misunderstandings were far too exhausting. She just wanted to help, but people treated her like a plague. Then it began to rain, and she decided to go look for Ning. She entered the house and called his name several times. Where could he be? Our protagonist wondered where he might be hiding. The girl looked behind the screen and saw a wooden ofuro. She stretched out her delicate hands. Trying to climb into the tub, she failed to see that Ning was there, half submerged in the water. Suddenly, the young man, who seemed almost asleep, felt a strong tug on his hair. He looked furiously at the little girl, who had not noticed his presence there. She was very surprised that someone was there. Zuzu desperately pushed Ning back into the water. Submerged again, he had an idea. Ning grabbed her arm. She was pulled into the water. How could that afuro be so deep? It felt like she was in a lake. Ning pulled her out of the water and asked what she thought she was doing. Zuzu, dejected, asked if he would believe that she was afraid he would drown and had gone to save him. She reminded him that he always fainted when it rained and thundered, so she was afraid he might fall asleep during his bath. Ning was surprised to hear that. He asked if she had tried to save him by drowning him right there. Given her height, it was easier for her to drown than for him. His words were far too sharp. Zuzu put on a big dramatic act, claiming that she carried all the emotional labor on the wheel of life's misery, only to receive yet another slap from the narrative. Ning pulled her out of the tub, explaining that he was neither sleeping nor bathing. The boy said he was using extreme methods to try to recover his memory. He needed to understand exactly what he had forgotten from his past. Wow, he really was handsome, Zuzu asked, intrigued why he did not ask Master Li for help recovering his memories, since he wanted them so badly. Ning secretly thought that if Master Li wanted to cure his amnesia, he would have done so long ago, but instead, he just kept ignoring him. He picked Zuzu up as if she were a little kitten and said he would take her to his room. The little girl insisted that she would sleep with him, but Ning explained that boys and girls no longer shared a bed after turning 7. Zuzu, showing big puppy eyes, told him that she was still only 6 years old and that they could follow that rule once she turned 7. She tried to convince him to sleep together because it was thundering, and if they did not stay together, Ning would have nightmares again. The boy was happy to see that she was worried about him. Thinking about it, 3 years had already passed since she started asking to stay with him every time a storm happened. The truth was that when she was with him, the nightmares never came. He no longer knew what it was like to sleep alone. Ning decided to allow her to stay with him that night. The boy watched her tenderly as Zuzu ran off to change her clothes. Far away, at a defense guard meeting, some soldiers were talking, and one of them said that the 7th prince had negotiated for years to maintain diplomacy, but only 2 years ago. But before the soldier could finish speaking, someone grievously wounded him. The general declared that peace negotiations were for cowards. Those men were the best of Yin. They should follow him and conquer the lands of Nanyue. He was Bai Huaimin, the general who protected the kingdom, uncle of Ning Huaimin. Ning heard his uncle declare that if that campaign failed, he would offer his neck to the blade. He reached out, begging his uncle not to start a war, because they would certainly lose. But before he could do anything, the people in his dream vanished. Ning found all of that very strange. The emperor ordered everyone to report to him. One of the men declared to the emperor that General Bai Huaimin had fled with his former troops. The emperor could hardly believe it. One of the elders said that it was to be expected of the border clans, as their hearts were treacherous. The northern frontier had been defeated. Bai had fled. How would they respond to that? Another counselor told the emperor that he had a plan. Since the treaty had been signed by the 7th prince and General Bai was his uncle, they should send Ning Huaimin as a hostage to Nanyue to prove their sincerity. Ning wondered, what choice would his father make? The emperor remained silent for a few moments. He asked the men whether the 7th prince was still being trained by Master Mingi. The boy heard the men talk about how the emperor wanted to abandon the prince, especially since Northern Yin had broken the pact first, making Ning bear the blame. He began to laugh bitterly, saying that he could expect nothing else, as he already knew how things would end. With tears in his eyes, Ning Huaimin finally understood why he had been abandoned from his childhood until that moment. Zuzu was calling him incessantly, trying to wake him up. He woke up completely devastated. To her surprise, Ning turned to the side and coughed up a red liquid. The storm was still raging when Master Li was summoned by Zuzu to help Ning. The old man was out of breath, asking where the red stains were. The boy, still sitting on his bed, was surprised. Zuzu asked how he had already cleaned the stains. Ning tried to explain that he had been very sedentary lately, and that the shock of that day must have shaken his body. He even felt refreshed. Master Li was relieved and said he would return to his duties. But Zuzu pulled the elder by the hair, asking him to at least check Ning. Seeing that triggered unpleasant memories in the boy, reminding him of when Zuzu had pulled his hair before. Then Master Li said something a bit enigmatic. They had already waited 3 years, so a few more days would not matter. What had to come would eventually return. Ning then replied that he had hidden in the valley for 3 years, and precisely now he felt panic. Zuzu was very confused by those riddles. She approached the boy, curious to know whether the nightmare had been that bad. Ning said he did not remember. Touching Zuzu's little face, he said it was nothing important and that she should go back to sleep. She still did not feel safe and jumped on top of him, insisting that they sleep together. Crushed by Zuzu, Ning finally accepted and said that he needed her. Would she be satisfied now? He let out a sigh of relief. Zuzu was happy that he had accepted. Suddenly, with a skillful move, he tossed the little girl under the blankets. She kept wriggling under the covers like a little ghost. The two slept peacefully. However, Ning woke up in the middle of the night. After some time, he touched Zuzu to see if she was really asleep. Then he gently stroked her hair. Without further explanation, the boy got up and left the room. But of course, our little protagonist was far too clever and was pretending to be asleep. Chinese wisdom said that while the mantis stalks the cicada, the oriole waits behind. Surely the boy was hiding something, and even if he had fooled the others, he could never fool someone like her. Stalking mode activated. While Ning walked through the woods, Zuzu stealthily followed behind him. She realized that this was the area Master Li had forbidden them all from entering. The little girl realized that it looked exactly like a horror movie scene, where the protagonist hears all the warning signs and still enters the forest. She then decided to go back home, since the Transmigrator's manual said that rule number 1 was to mind your business. However, before she could return, Ning suddenly appeared in front of her. Oh no, Zuzu was caught red-handed. With a slightly seductive expression, Ning asked why she had stopped following him. Oh my god, she was doomed. Zuzu said that she refused to be cannon fodder. Besides, how did he know she was following him? After all, her disguise was impeccable. She turned to leave, saying that he could go on, since she was already heading back home. Ning grabbed the little girl by the dress and said that it was a pity she was not the one making decisions there. He carried her like a kitten, and Zuzu protested, claiming that if he wanted to take her, Ning would have to finish her off right there. To her great surprise, the boy simply replied, "So be it." Mentally, Zuzu was sad that he had turned into a villain so quickly. He could have at least let her believe that he would be nice to her. She replied that if he had already decided, who was she to refuse? Plan 1. Retreat to advance. Ning let Zuzu go and told her to walk ahead. Oh no, her plan failed before it even began. She threw herself to the ground, repeating several times that she would not go to the same place as him. Plan 2 was to burn the boats, leaving no chance for him to turn back. Zuzu asked why he was not reacting. Suddenly, she saw him take something out from inside his clothes. Oh no, he really wants to hurt her. Before he could do anything, she stood up and said that she had always been curious to explore the forbidden grounds because she loved exploring. Ning just stared at her without reacting. He was about to bribe her with a jade pendant, but apparently that would not be necessary. He smiled, and then gently took her hand. Into the night, they continued together. The two walked calmly through the woods at night. Zuzu was terrified, thinking that Ning would take her far away just to get rid of her. Looking at her with tenderness, the boy said that he would not harm her at all, and asked her to close her eyes. Zuzu quickly moved away from him, questioning what his intentions were in asking her to keep her eyes closed. Ning asked whether it would be necessary to take her so far if he wanted to harm her. She realized that he was right, and finally decided to close her eyes. But before anything else, she said that he was forbidden from making any sneak attacks. Already losing a bit of patience, Ning repeated that he would not do anything to her. He took out a small purple pouch. Ning noticed that although Zuzu trusted him a lot, she was still quite afraid. He brought a pink ribbon close to her face. The boy used the ribbon to blindfold her, and Zuzu took the chance to point out that he really did not trust her. Haha. He asked whether he should not. The little girl replied that he should trust her. Yes. Ning stood up and Zuzu waited to see what would happen. He tossed a little white powder into his hand, and right after that, he blew it into the wind, saying that she could look now. She asked what all that was for just to tie a knot. The protagonist began to remove the blindfold, saying that he was far too mysterious. She opened one eye to look. Zuzu was amazed by what was in front of her. The forest was completely illuminated by fireflies. All around them, many small glowing dots were flying, and Zuzu was completely impressed. She asked the boy if he had arranged all of that. Ning reminded her that it was her birthday. Then he handed her a small amulet. Zuzu looked at the amulet in admiration, asking if it was really for her. He gave her the jewel, wishing that on that auspicious day, good luck would be with her. That gift made our little protagonist very happy. Very curious, Zuzu asked how Ning had managed to gather all those fireflies there. He explained that he had found a secret formula in an ancient text. Basically, Ning had combined some types of herbs and managed to do it. He declared that he was capable of doing many more things than hurting others. Zuzu replied that even in a wonderful moment like that, Ning was provoking her. The boy confessed that he had learned how to make that kind of surprise from her. Our little protagonist was very surprised, and heard the boy explain that a proper surprise should start small and then become something big. Finally, she remembered a fateful day. Some time ago, 2 days before Ning Huaimin's birthday, Zuzu was calling for him. Jing had made her a beautiful carp kite, and she wanted to show it to Ning. However, when she entered the house, she saw no sign of the boy. She thought sadly that there was no one there, until she smelled the scent of orchids. In front of her, there was a wooden box decorated with some drawings. Zuzu picked up the box, wondering, what could that be? To her surprise, inside the box there was a cloth doll that looked exactly like Ning. She wondered, what was that doll? Suddenly, someone grabbed her arm tightly. Ning appeared from behind and asked the girl who had said she could touch his things. Zuzu apologized and explained that she had gone to look for him so they could fly the kite. and that she should not have touched his box. However, he only remained silent. Ning took the box from her hands and turned to leave, telling her to go away. She lightly grabbed the fabric of his clothes. Trying to follow him, she asked where he had gotten the cloth doll. The little girl began to ask questions, but he did not answer her at all. Rudely, he pushed her away and told Zuzu it was none of her business. She began to stagger backward, stunned by his gesture. It was too bad she fell over the kite. Ning asked if she was okay. Zuzu replied that she was fine and that he did not need to tell her anything. She was very upset that he had knocked her to the ground. Ning apologized to her, saying that he had not knocked her down on purpose. Zuzu revealed to him that the doll was not the problem, but that its smell was similar to a poison, and that she had finally learned her lesson. Already in the garden, Ning caught up to the little girl and asked what poison she was talking about. Ning said that he finally understood everything. She asked if he was sure he was okay. Pushing her away again, he said that it was not something she should worry about. Oh no. His words hurt her deeply. Furious with the boy, she declared that if she ever spoke to him again, she would turn into a dog. Jing heard that entire conversation. He asked Zuzu what had happened. The little girl was clearly very angry. She asked him to be her witness. From that moment on, she was cutting ties with Ning. The three of them stared at each other in silence. Jing became very angry and said that Ning was a boy full of bad ideas. The boy knelt on the ground, saying that he would seek justice for her. Zuzu told him that Ning had broken the kite he gave her. That caught Jing completely off guard. He became even angrier and asked if Ning had touched her. Zuzu and the older boy were trying to understand that situation. She thought that interpretation had gone a little too far. Leaving Ning alone in the garden, Jing picked up Zuzu and left while complaining about that absurdity, saying that she did not deserve to be treated that way and that he would no longer allow Ning to play with her. She was determined to make Ning regret having knocked her to the ground. Ning remained silent, holding the wooden box. He fiddled with it in his hands. 2 hours later, at the door of Ju Yuji's room, he hung the carp kite. The boy began to apologize again, saying that he had been in a bad mood earlier and had not meant to treat her that way. The box she had seen was a gift from his family because in 2 days, he took a deep breath. Then, Ning confessed that in 2 days it would be his birthday, and unfortunately, his own family had used the celebratory date to hurt him. Ning raised his head and asked Zuzu not to ignore him. Please. A few moments passed. Giving up on talking to her, he decided to leave. However, Zuzu appeared behind him, asking what Ning was doing at her door. He felt very embarrassed. Ning wondered if that emotional confession had been for nothing. Later, I will feel my toes sinking into the ground. Walking toward them, Jing peeked through the crack of the door while Ning was still speechless in front of Zuzu. The boy mocked Ning, saying that he did not need to repeat the confession because he had heard everything. Jing approached the little girl, reminding her that they were not talking to Ning and that he had made an even bigger kite for her. Ning watched as he took the little girl back home. Now he was the one who was furious. How could Jing be so unbearable? The two left before he could even give her the kite he had repaired. Not knowing what to do next, the boy stared at the door for a few moments. He swore revenge on Jing, but now his biggest problem was how to make Zuzu forgive him. 2 days later, on the night of Ning's birthday, he went to Zuzu's room and knocked insistently on the door. The boy was determined to make peace with her no matter what she said to him. He noticed that in the 2 days that had passed, she had avoided him in every possible way. Zuzu even ran away from him before he could say anything. Ning decided to knock on the door a few more times. Suddenly, Zuzu appeared with a beautiful cake, wishing him a happy birthday. She looked very happy. The boy was speechless. What a wonderful surprise, right? Zuzu also seemed quite happy. He was shocked. How had she remembered? The little girl explained that if it were not for the surprise, she would have done something earlier. And the truth was that it had been very hard for her to keep the secret for 2 whole days. Zuzu revealed that she wanted to maximize the surprise. And besides, making a perfect cake had been quite difficult. She asked if he was truly moved, right? Ning gave a shy smile. He sincerely thanked her. Returning to the present, Ning explained that he knew Zuzu wanted to see meteors, but since he could not grab the stars, he had to be more creative. Our little protagonist was truly impressed by everything. Something in what she said made him remember something stored in the past. He remembered a little child very similar to Zuzu, who had said that she was very impressed with him. Ning asked if Zuzu had ever said something like that to him before. She could swear that she always said things like that to him. Had he only noticed it now? Suddenly, Jing appeared and interrupted the two, saying that he had finally found them. It was no surprise that he had not been able to find Zuzu anywhere. He crouched down and gently patted Zuzu's hair, wishing her many blessings, and then said that he had prepared a present for her, which was together with gifts sent by her mother and other people in her room. Wow, was Ning jealous? He suggested that they hunt some birds since they were still in the woods, and Zuzu had asked to eat pheasant, right? Jing knew very well that this strategy was to prevent him from returning home with his little sister. She asked if they could catch any pheasants so late at night. Ning said that maybe others could not, but he certainly could. Jing replied that his little sister's request was an order. Zuzu did not quite understand why there was so much conflict between the two. Half an hour later, they had captured several birds. She looked in admiration at the pile of pheasants, while the two boys stared at each other with hostility. Our protagonist felt lost after all. Why were those two provoking each other? At a time like that, only Master Li was capable of controlling them. As if he had read her thoughts, the elder appeared in the woods, asking whether those little rascals were having a feast without him. Zuzu jumped into his arms, confessing how relieved she was that he had arrived there, because being between those two was like stepping on 1,000 needles. Suddenly, something caught Master Li's attention. He yanked the child upward, making her dodge an arrow. Zuzu asked what that was. Ning pulled her by the arm, shouting for them to run because there were assassins lurking. Far away at the Nanyue Palace, someone was knocking on the door. A man reported to the Prince of Anping that they had located the Medicine King Valley. Cao Sheng asked whether he had alerted anyone at the Yanyu Pavilion. The man replied that he had not, and as he had predicted, Princess Rian had been very meticulous in hiding her daughter there. She even secretly sent some clothes and letters. The prince's wish was that the Medicine King Valley would no longer exist by the next day. The cruel prince was determined to turn his daughter's birthday into a tragic date for her. Ju Yuji was a threat because she knew too much. The ninjas advanced through the forest, and the leader commanded them to search everywhere. Nearby, there was a cave on the mountainside. Phew, what luck. The four of them reached the improvised hideout safely. Zuzu noticed that inside the cave there was a turbulent river flowing. She asked Master Li not to lead them into a dead end, and he realized that he had forgotten about that river because he had taken a few gulps of his drink. Ning said that up to that point he had not seen any villagers, so what could be happening? The elder explained that he had ordered them to hide earlier, but the problem was that he sensed a great misfortune approaching. When he was sure that evils were coming, he warned the villagers first. When the assassins arrived, Master Li had just encountered them in the forest. He told the children not to be afraid because that cave was well hidden and they could never be found there. Suddenly, they heard some barking behind them and the atmosphere changed completely. The truth was that none of them expected the assassins to search for them with dogs. Master Li then declared that they would have only one option. He pointed to the treacherous river, saying that they could supposedly save themselves by following the current. Zuzu could not take so much danger anymore. But they were interrupted because some stones began to roll at the cave entrance. Telling the little girl that she could not hesitate and that staying there would guarantee the ninjas would reach them, Zuzu did not want to jump. She was afraid of heights and of the water. Ning touched her hand. He moved closer to Zuzu and said that if she felt afraid, she could hold on to him. Jing asked how he dared take advantage of the situation. Ning gently picked her up in his arms, and with a determined look, he stared at the cliff. Quickly, the boy jumped. Zuzu screamed the entire time as expected. Behind them, Jing was still shouting that he himself should be the one to take care of her. Ning could no longer hear him because he was focused on landing safely in the water. The two reached the bottom of the waterfall. The waters seemed very rough. Phew, they managed to reach the surface, but the situation was still very dangerous. Zuzu warned the boy that there was a rock approaching them. Ning immediately noticed the danger. He held her carefully so she would not get hurt. That impact hit him deeply. Suddenly, his vision began to darken. An immense flow of memories began to arrive. He saw himself much younger, finding a little baby hidden in a bamboo basket. Then he remembered sharing a strange milk with the same baby. Then that strange dream appeared, in which he saw a princess and a cradle. The memories came fragmented, a woman stabbing him, and his gaze fading into the distance. Finally, he remembered that he had hurt the same girl from his memories. With great effort, Zuzu pulled Ning out of the water. Very tired, she sat on the ground, saying that despite her fear of heights, she still knew how to swim well. However, Ning was still unconscious because of the impact. Zuzu became desperate, hoping that he would wake up again. She began performing CPR on him, trying to help him. The girl had a daring idea. She touched his chin, slightly lifting his face. She leaned closer to give him mouth to mouth. Zuzu got closer and closer until Ning woke up before she could carry out the act. The two stared at each other for a few moments, quite embarrassed. Quickly, he turned to the side, asking what she thought she was doing. Zuzu tried to explain that as a last alternative, she would perform mouth to mouth. The little girl jumped into his arms, feeling relieved that he was alive. With tears in her eyes, she thanked Ning for saving her again. She remembered very well the rock at the waterfall. They escaped by a hair's breadth. His memories returned, leaving Ning a little saddened. He pulled his face away from Zuzu. What was he thinking, after all? Suddenly, the two of them began to hear some shouts in the distance. Apparently, those terrible ninjas were still after them. Ning asked her to stay hidden there because he would lead them away. Zuzu said that they were well hidden among the reeds and that he did not need to take such a risk. However, Ning reminded her that they had dogs with them. Hopeful, she asked if he would come back, but he only remained silent. Ning thought for a few moments and left. Half an hour later, Zuzu was still hidden among the foliage, waiting for the boy to return. She looked up at the sky and noticed that it was almost dawn. Where could he be? Zuzu truly wished that he would come back soon. She crawled stealthily beneath the leaves, wondering if she could see him somehow. Suddenly, a large knife sliced through the foliage right in front of her. Oh no! Zuzu was found by one of the assassin ninjas. He revealed that they had spent the entire night searching for her, and the little girl was hidden there among the reeds. Now it was time to feel fear. Very much fear. On impulse, she stood up. Zuzu was suddenly face to face with one of the dangerous ninjas. Another assassin arrived, and the two cornered her. Then, she had an idea. Our young protagonist was very bold and was willing to do whatever it took. Placing her hands on her hips, Zuzu declared that it was a pleasure to meet them there. She did not want to brag, but so far she had not been captured by them. She said that they did not stand the slightest chance against her. The blades moved quickly, but before they could wound Zuzu, they were stopped by another sword. Ning grabbed the little girl, protecting her from the imminent danger. He placed her over his shoulder and fled swiftly from the enemies. Well, it seemed that those ninjas would not bother them anymore. The two fell to the ground, exhausted, and Ning placed Zuzu back on the ground. He dropped the sword. Ning crouched down and touched her face, asking if she was okay. Zuzu was very frightened when she saw the red stains on his hand and backed away from the boy. He became worried when he saw her pulling away. The boy asked if she was afraid of him. Zuzu could barely answer him. In her thoughts, Zuzu was conflicted, because he had saved her life and she needed to be grateful. But how could he have annihilated two ninjas while being just a 16-year-old boy? He heard her thoughts. The truth was that Zuzu did not understand how he seemed to feel no remorse at all. How could she trust him? He let out a sigh. Ning stood up and told the little girl that he would drive away other ninjas and prevent more of them from passing through there. Zuzu asked him not to leave, and that now they had enough time to run back home. However, something caught her attention. Oh my god, more ninjas were arriving. What could they do? Zuzu positioned herself in front of him as if someone as small as her could stop 3 adult men. Ning noticed that despite her young age, Zuzu was very determined. He commented that he thought she was afraid of him, and yet she was there protecting him. Zuzu whispered that she needed time to think. After all, he was injured and would need all the help he could get. Then, she noticed that the ninjas were not attacking, and Ning asked her to close her eyes. Zuzu said that he could not use her birthday privileges all the time, but before she could say anything else, Ning struck her neck, knocking the little girl out, and then she fell into his arms. The men in black greeted Ning Huaimin, the 7th prince. They reported to the boy that half an hour earlier they had received a signal by bird and hurried to arrive there. Ning made a gesture for them to be silent. He held Zuzu in his arms and said that she should not have stood in front of him. The boy thought that it was time to end the coexistence between the two of them. He ordered his guards to get Jingye and have him take Juyuji back home. As for the assassins, he made a request. Ning asked his guards to leave one of the ninjas alive to carry the message that there were no survivors. Sometime later, at the Medicine King Valley Temple, Zuzu woke up and seemed quite tired. She sat up on the bed and asked Jing what he was doing there. The boy explained that after he jumped off the cliff, Master Li saved him. Then, they found Zuzu unconscious on the grass and took her back home. Ignoring everything he had said, the little girl asked where Ning was. Jing declared to her that he suspected those ninjas had been summoned by Ning. He said that when he found her unconscious, she was holding that handkerchief with red stains. Zuzu held the small handkerchief while Jing told her that they searched the entire forest, but did not find Ning anywhere. Jing said that this could only mean that the boy had abandoned her while she was unconscious. Zuzu made a huge scene, saying that Ning would never be capable of doing something like that. Jing said that she should stop trusting him for her own good. Our little protagonist was devastated by the news. Not knowing what to think, Jing could hardly believe her reaction. He was quite disappointed and said that he needed to go out to carry out some orders from the master. Zuzu asked what he was talking about. With a smile, Jing revealed that it was time to take her home. She was shocked by that information. The next day, a carriage entered the village. Jing asked Zuzu why she had been so sad since he gave her such good news. Did she not like going back home? Zuzu did not know what to say, because her family would harm him greatly in the future, and she did not want to reveal any details to him. Instead, she preferred to ask if he wanted to discover his origins. Jing replied that he had left the valley to seek his origins, but he was not in a hurry. He assumed that she was tense because she was worried about him. Smiling at the little girl, he said that whatever he found, he would tell her. Despite the answer, Zuzu did not seem very excited. She wondered how the search for her brother was going. With the best intentions, the girl had even drawn Ning. As As the carriage approached, the guards asked people to clear the way. Jing asked the coachman what was happening. He replied that on that day, the delegation from the northern Yin border would enter the city, and they needed to wait for the procession to pass before moving on. Zuzu asked if that had not already passed. The man told her that Northern Yin had torn up the treaty and lost to Nanyue. They infiltrated and even sent the seventh prince as a hostage, called Ning Huaimin, and that was why the whole city was talking about him. He pointed to a procession entering on horseback, its leader riding at the front. Mounted on a beautiful white horse was Ning Huaimin, who had been her fraternal bond. Zuzu was shocked to see him. Wow, what was he doing there? Ning heard someone calling him from a distance. He stopped in front of the carriage where the little girl was calling out to him. She stepped firmly onto the ground, walking toward him. Zuzu was very emotional upon seeing him again. Coldly, the young man said that she had mistaken him for someone else. Even Jing was petrified. Looking down at her from his white horse, the seventh prince repeated that she must have mistaken him for someone else. Zuzu could hardly believe those words. Then, she noticed his gaze. There was something very different about him. Our protagonist was confused, thinking about how he could have eyes of different colors, in addition to having changed his hairstyle. Trying to be polite, the little girl apologized and explained that he looked very much like someone she knew and felt very familiar. The prince said that he had once known a troublesome child, and she gave him the same feeling. Since it was time for him to enter the city, he bade the little girl farewell. As he rode off at a gallop, Zuzu processed that he was the seventh in the royal lineage of his kingdom. Jing also kept looking at him before leaving. How could the same person have a second version of himself? Zuzu wondered if all of that was just a mere coincidence. Then, she decided to ask Jing if there was any kind of magic in that world capable of changing someone's face. Jing replied that she should read more and meddle less with medicines, because that was Master Li's secret art. He explained that there was a pill capable of altering a person's face, but it was a very painful procedure. Without the antidote, the person would remain permanently changed. Zuzu found it insane that a pill could perform plastic surgery. She did not understand why Ning Huaimin was pretending not to know her. After all, what could he be plotting? Our protagonist decided to let it go, because there was still a chance that they were different people. Zuzu invited Jingye to leave, because her mother was waiting for them. Nearby, Princess Ruyan was anxiously awaiting that reunion. She asked Luby why her daughter had not arrived yet. Had something happened to her? The girl replied that everything was fine, because security on the roads had been reinforced. Then the princess heard Zuzu calling out to her. The little girl jumped into her mother's arms. What joy. At last they were reunited. The two were very happy, for it was a wonderful moment. She caressed the child's little face, saying that she was worried her daughter had lost weight after those 3 years away. But Ruyan was happy because Zuzu seemed healthy. My, how you've grown. The princess lamented having been away for so long. The little girl told her mother that she missed her very much, and her brothers as well. Her mother explained to her daughter that her brothers had gone to the palace to receive the delegation from Northern Yin, so Zuzu would have to wait until tomorrow to see them. The little girl wondered, why did that plot feel so familiar to her? And with great astonishment, she remembered, the narrative was about to reach her third brother. According to the original plot, on that very day, Zuzu's third brother would be completely drunk, saying all kinds of nonsense. The Nanyue Empire had organized a banquet, and the emperor arranged for the third brother to put Northern Yin in its place. Oops, that surely did not please them very much. That same night, in the back garden, the third brother was found making out with a concubine. They even found pieces of the concubine's red corset among the young man's clothes. Zuzu imagined that, since it had not happened yet, it would be better not to tell her mother anything. The little girl asked to go to the palace because she missed her aunt very much, and would not sleep that night without seeing her. The princess then agreed to take her. While they were talking, Jingye approached. Ruyan asked her daughter who that young man was. Zuzu realized that she had forgotten to formally introduce him. Zuzu introduced Jing, telling her mother that he had taken very good care of her, and told the young man that her mother was the princess consort of Anping. He greeted the noblewoman with great elegance. The princess noticed that his face was very familiar, and that she seemed to have seen him somewhere before. Then, she asked him to call her Aunt Lu and to accompany her maids back to the estate. Jingye seemed happy and agreed to return. While they were heading to the palace, Zuzu asked her mother how her third brother had spent so many years in the army. Ruyan said that he had changed a lot, but since she spent more time in the palace, she did not know very well how he was. Zuzu would understand when she saw him soon. She sadly thought that perhaps her mother believed that her brother might not be as irresponsible and womanizing as before, but soon the plot would be back on track, and he would probably not be able to resist the storyline, and then they would be doomed. Zuzu closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. When everything went dark, she heard someone telling her to get off the prince's body. She opened her eyes. not really understanding where she was. The man said that if it were not for Yue's requests, he would not even have saved her. And then she saw herself reflected in his eyes. Zuzu was an adult again. How was that possible? Maybe she was dreaming again. The man asked if she was going to get up or not. Zuzu, still very confused, asked who he was. A maid appeared and helped the girl stand up, asking if the princess was all right. Zuzu asked if she was really a princess. Well, since it was a dream, anything was possible, right? The man told her to stop that act, because Yue had already told him that Ju Yuji tried to push her into the lake. She dodged it, and that was why she fell into the water. Zuzu had no idea what he was talking about because she had just fallen asleep in her mother's arms. Without her noticing, someone approached. That beautiful and elegant young woman was Yue. Almost immediately, Zuzu noticed her. Yue asked why the princess was staring at her. Zuzu tried to cover it up and replied that her clothes were beautiful and her skin so fair. Zuzu was impressed by the girl's beauty. The man rudely asked if Ju Yuji had anything to say in her defense. Yue asked the prince not to scold Zuzu because it had been her fault. Our protagonist was very confused. Which prince was she talking about? That man was the crown prince of Northern Yin, Ning Changting. He asked her what the reason was for such surprise. She should already know all of that. The truth was that she knew nothing. Before he could continue speaking, Zuzu interrupted him, asking him to be quiet because she was thinking. Are you ready? In the original plot, Ning Changting and the fake Ju Yuji were the toxic protagonist couple of the third part of the book. Do you remember that green-eyed child at the beginning of our story? There you go. She was the daughter of Zhu Chaosheng and his lover, Shen Yulan. According to the story, Zhu Chaosheng was a Northern Yin infiltrator, and because of that, Nanyue lost the war. That was why the prince offered to send the fake Zhu Yuji to arrange a political marriage. The girl then became the new princess and was sent to Yin, and then the torment began. He chased her. She ran away, and the two of them were incapable of ending that chaotic romance. However, if Zuzu was the true protagonist, why was she there? She turned to the lady-in-waiting and asked who she was. The girl, slightly terrified, replied that the prince was not in the mood for games. Wonderful. Now she was the heroine. Well, that must be a dream. And if it really was, then that girl Yue... Zuzu asked if she had been the prince's first love. Yue looked a little embarrassed and said that she did not harbor inappropriate feelings for the prince. Our bold protagonist told everyone to shut up because she needed to think. Her current theory was that Yue had heard about her plans to marry the prince, felt jealous, pushed her into the lake, and pretended to be weak to deceive him, claiming that Zuzu had jumped into the lake herself. But why did it all seem so carefully planned? Then, something in the distance caught her eye. If she was inside a dream, how was that possible? She recognized the young man from her previous dreams. Zuzu ran over and threw herself at him. The girl grabbed his arm and declared that his presence illuminated her tragic life. Since he only appeared in her dreams, she must be asleep. The young man was completely shocked. Trying to push the girl away, he asked where they knew each other from. Why was she on top of him? Zuzu said that in her dreams he was very different. So why was he acting like a crying baby now? Ning Changting pulled her away from the young man, asking how she dared to harass another man. She broke free from the prince's arms, saying that she would love to kick him out of her dream, as it was none of his business. Zuzu asked him to step away because she did not want to start slapping people in her dreams. Yue grabbed Changting by the arm, asking how Ju Yuji dared to be rude to the prince. Zuzu did not understand the girl's interference. So now, this was her chance to use her martial arts moves. And that's it for today, folks. Look, I really enjoyed this story, and I truly hope you enjoyed it too. I loved getting to know Zuzu. She really seems a bit crazy, and yet she manages to be very sensible. What do you think of her? Why do you think Ning Huaimin constantly forgets her? How is she able to keep jumping through time? And if you want more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos I post. This story is called After the Novel Villains Heard My Inner Voice, and our recap went up to chapter 41. Kisses, and see you next time.